Hello, Lothar here, PCT Thru Hiker 2021. You can probably guess by the way I'm dressed, in California it's starting to get cold, first rain of the season. I'm here at Lake Morena and just doing my next video. This one's going to be on tents, particularly I'm going to focus on the duplex, but a lot of the points I'm going to make are applicable to pretty much anyone using a tent on a thru hike. So I'm going to jump straight in. First one is how you store your tent. Now, do you remember when you maybe when you were younger, you always had to pack up afterwards and trying to remember how to roll the tent in just the right way that you get it to fit in its original bag. So what I did was, when I got my duplex, I took the original bag and threw it away. Well, not literally, I just used it for something else. So I invested in a bag that is same material, so it's cubic fibre, very lightweight. But guess what? It's just that little bit bigger, such that I don't have to faff around early in the morning when I'm tired, so I'm waking up and I'm trying to make everything fit. I would put it into a slightly bigger bag, roll it up. I was always very careful to roll tents up, because if it's going to last 100, 150 days, you want to look after it. I put it in this larger bag, and then I would compress it down, and lo and behold, you get it down to pretty much the same size you had in the original bag, but without the fight of getting it in the bag. So probably invest in a slightly bigger bag. I also depends if you use tent poles or trekking poles to put up your tent. I always stored my poles separate from the main tent, so the idea is I want to minimise any risk of puncturing or stressing the fabric of the main body of the tent. So I didn't actually put the poles in there. I always kept them separate, so kept them in a separate bag, and in the same way I kept the tent pegs, okay, because they're sharp edges. I wanted to keep them far away from the fabric of the tent. It just happens, this is just a glass, a reading glass case that I just used to shove in there, and I put those inside my pole bag, and then I'd store that separately, probably down the side of my tent, down the side of my backpack, away from the main fabric of the tent. Now, some people have videos where they're stuffing the fabric of the tent in to make it fit. Now, again, this is where it comes down to the fact that if you want to go for a very small pack, when you're doing thru hikes, maybe 40 litres, and make everything fit, that's great. I went for a bigger pack that I could cinch down, such that I had plenty of space to play with, and I didn't have to stuff things in. The idea of stuffing a $600 tent in, where the main body could be touching maybe a stove or something sharp, anything like that, you're going to get puncture marks. So I would advise rolling the tent nicely, putting it in the tent, putting it in a slightly bigger bag, and you can do it very, very efficiently. And that's why I went for a slightly bigger backpack, so all the way through I didn't have to worry about making things fit. I could get my bear canister in if I wanted to put extra food in. I didn't always have to make it fit into a slightly larger backpack, and in the same way the backpack was slightly bigger, very slightly heavier, but also slightly stronger, so its tolerance on extra weight meant that it didn't have breaking straps or very minimal failures. Anyway, coming back to tent. The thing about tents is when you pitch them, you want to be careful how you pitch them. And again, we all think, oh, it's a tent, just put it up. I made a characteristic fundamental error on day 9, and I said in the previous video, where I put my tent up, and it turned out that it was in very, very windy conditions, gustings, and basically both both tent poles I had, these are my new ones, snapped. Carbon fibre tents both snapped due to the pressure, because I pitched the tent wrong way into the wind. So the duplex, as I said previously in the video, there are 2 blue labels on one side of a tent. You position those in such a way that you orientate the tent into the wind, and the idea is it's simply there's door flaps that either flap open if you've got it around the wrong way, or naturally close in the wind if you've got the orientation correct. So you are going to have exposed conditions sometime during your thru hikes where you're going to have to deal with the wind and have the last thing you want is a lot of flapping straps, flapping flaps. There you go, keeping you up all night. So again, read the instructions of your own specific tent. Now, when you have failures, you're going to have a failure of some kind. Now, let's assume you have a tent pole failure. Like me, I had a catastrophic failure where both tent poles broke while I was in Whitewater Preserve. It was late at night. When I came back to my tent, it was flat on the ground, and I went through that 10 minutes of cursing, swearing, I can't believe this happened to me. Just feeling sorry for myself, thinking, oh no, I've got to come off trail, my tent, I can't put my tent up. And then I had that moment of just calming down and moment of clarity. When I looked at the broken pieces, I realised I could cut the shock cord that keeps the poles together, and luckily cobble together one pole out of the broken pieces of 2. So again, you can always find a way through. And I had a one trekking pole which was not the right height, but I managed to orientate it at an angle such that I could use it as a second support. And it just so happened that was on day 9 of my hike, and I actually used the same system for pitching my tent thereafter for the rest of the hike, the whole hike. So I had a cobbled together pieces of a carbon fibre pole on one side, and I had an orientated trekking pole at an angle on the other, all the way through thereafter. So I didn't even need to replace the poles, so I found a way through. Now, if you've got one of the more complicated tents, like the well, they've got an REI quarter dome, and I think it's half dome, and they have very complicated pole systems. So Duplex has just literally a straight pole. These other tents, and I'm sure a lot of other brands have it, spider type sort of things coming off the central disc. Pole goes this way, pole goes this way. It's very complicated. Now, if you have a failure with that, they're very much more fiddly to solve on trail. Now, I mean, I'd probably advocate having in your spares box one of these. This is just basically a splint which you can use to solve a breakage in one position of that pole. But I think my general advice is for a thru hike is if you can find a tent system that doesn't have a too complicated pole system, such that if there is a failure, look at it and go, right, if there's a failure there, how could I deal with it? So if you can deal with the splint, then it's okay. If it's more complicated than that, then maybe reconsider a different tent, such that you can solve breakages on the trail. Other things that can happen. Now, damage. Now, I had damage from hailstorms. I had also some stress point damage on my tent, on the fabric of the tent, just through general wear and tear. I was on the trail for 114 days, and I had some basic wear and tear. Now, I would carry two things to deal with that. These are the Dyneema, basically, it's like seam seal tape, but it's in the form of a patch. Actually, I'm not sure if it's carbon fibre, but it feels like the same material. They're made by 3M, and basically you can peel them off, and you can have a whole patch that goes across, repair a tear or something. And similarly, you can get this seam seal tape in a roll and do the same job. Now, I had two occurrences. I had massive hailstorm. There was a hailstorm about that big, and I mean generally that big. But they were hitting my tent. It wasn't super heavy, but I was having a hit on my tent, maybe one every 10 seconds or so, for about 10 minutes, and it was worrying that the size of these stones would cause damage. And lo and behold, I had a couple of tears in my tent. When the storm stopped, I was able to repair them. And what I would do is I put one of these on the outside of the tent, and this is the fabric of the tent. I put another one on the inside of the tent, so it was doubly supported. And that worked fine. And also I had positions on the tent around where the guy ropes come in. There were reinforced areas where it obviously is reinforcing the connection between your guy rope and the main body of the tent. Now, I had some stress marks there after 114 days of hiking, and again I just used some of the seam seal tape, and I just did a steady loop around where these stress marks were, and that solved the problem. So I've got a fully working duplex tent, albeit it's been a bit repaired, but it's beautifully protected, and I will use it again on the thru hike. Now, the other thing I would also do is protect the tent when you're laying it out for the first time on the ground. You'd use either a tent footprint, or in my case, or a lot of other hikers, we use Tyvek sheets like this. And this is just simply a protective layer that will protect the bottom basin of your tent. And I used that all the way through the hike. I had no damage on the bottom of the tent. And on the inside of the tent, I thought, I want to have some protection, and it just happened I had another reason for having a protection layer like this. Is the Gossamer Gear foam pad recommended by Darwin and lots of others. I use this primarily to stop my sleeping pad in my tent slipping around, but it had a dual purpose in the fact that it also protected the inside bottom layer, the basin of my tent. So I was very lucky. I had no puncture marks on the basin of my tent, again, after 114 days. So I had a result. So I looked after my tent, but it wasn't too onerous. So a larger bag, seam seal tape, protection on bottom and top, and I was very happy with the way that system worked. And as I said, it wasn't too onerous. Now, one other thing that I did see happening a lot, and before I started doing a thru hike, I had failures on my gear, and it was normally around these things, zips of different types. And I had a family friend who, in a previous career, used to work in a zip factory, or overseeing the manufacturing of zips. And I was complaining to him. I said, why does my gear always fail? It's usually the zips. And he'd say, well, did you ever lubricate them? And I kind of thought, I never even thought you should lubricate them. Guess what? You should lubricate your zips on all your gear. So since that conversation with him 2 years ago, I've been religiously carrying one of these things. This one happens to be a Zippy Cool, but there are other brands. And it's a lubricating zip for all zippers. It's a bit like the same sort of feel and material. It's a bit like the lip salve I have, but it's designed in such a way that you can lubricate your zips. And every stop now, if I did a 0, and I did that 3 or 4 times on the trail, where they would coincide with my spares box would be picked up at a 0 stop. I may be there for a day or day and a half. I would take out all my gear and just lubricate everything. Did that 3 times on trail. I never had a single problem with the zip. I never had a snag. I never had a splitting zip. But you also got to remember that if you don't do that, your zips are going to fall into dirt, crud, and whatever else. And chances are, late at night, you're going to be jamming. If you want to close your zip really quick and stressing it, give your zips a chance. Lubricate them on all your gear, and there's a good chance they'll last longer and hopefully not have any catastrophic failures on trail. Another thing about tents, condensation. Now, with all tents, you're going to have a problem with condensation if you've got single layer, because obviously if you've got a cold air on the outside and you're heavily breathing and warm air on the inside, guess what? It condenses on the cool inside of your tent. There's not a lot you can do about that other than just try and increase the ventilation of your tent. Now, with a duplex, you've got 2 doors. You can open one side or the other, or both, and have a breeze through. And I'm sure there's other systems with other tents. You can have a way in which you can increase the ventilation of your particular tent. Now, I came across a person on the thru hike who was using these sheets. There's the sheets you can buy for a duplex, which are very thin fabric, but you can clip on the inside and on the main panels of the tent, on both sides of the tent, and it basically creates just a very thin layer to effectively create a 2 layer of your roof of your tent, and thereby any condensation will be minimized, because your breath would actually settle on the inner layer. Now, I've since bought those, and I will use those in situations where I know I'm going to have very high risk of condensation. Now, on the PCT, I was lucky I didn't have that. I think I might use those on the AT, I don't know, but I've got them in my spares box. They're just very thin sheets of fabric you can buy from Zpacks, and they're just a way in which you can turn your duplex into basically a 2-layer system if condensation is a really, really big problem. I'm just looking at my list here. Obviously, if your stuff gets wet, for example, if you get it wet on the inside, so you've got condensation, and I had that in Crabtree Meadows just before I went up Whitney. It got very, very cold, and my breath was actually condensing on the inside, and in the morning it was basically, I had a layer of ice on the inside of my tent, so be careful to knock that down and actually sweep it out of your tent so it doesn't melt, and then next time you use your tent it's soaking inside. Obviously dry your tent if it gets wet. Now with the duplex, I found it was actually remarkably quick to dry. So even if I did have a point where I needed to dry out my tent, I could put it out for maybe 10-15 minutes, and in a breeze it was pretty much dry. And I was quite surprised how quickly it was. It's not like you're trying to dry out canvas or anything like that and all these other materials. The carbon fibre stuff, and I'm sure other modern fabrics, dry a lot quicker, and I was pleased that happened. And hopefully I wasn't spending most of my day trying to dry out my kit. Mosquitoes, right? Dealing with bugs, yes. Now, in certain parts of the trail, you're going to have lots of mosquitoes. Now, one thing I hated, and I'm a very light sleeper, so if there's a mosquito in my tent buzzing away, I will never get any sleep. So I developed a system whereby getting my gear inside my tent, I'd actually open the zip very slightly, maybe about that long, and I'd actually unload my backpack and stuff that I put my stove in, and I'd actually put it through almost like a mini little airlock. I'd only open that little zip section. I'd leave the zip open, but I'd manually do it, open and close it. And I'd put my stuff in there, my first aid kit and my shoes and things like that, my other clothes. And when it came to me getting in, what I would do is I would actually lower the flap such that the mosquitoes couldn't get to the zip. I'd undo the zip, and in one move, I would literally wave up the main flap. That would push all the mosquitoes away and get into the tent, and then the flap would naturally come down and close. It was again like an airlock. It sounds trivial, but if you've got a lot of mosquitoes in your tent, it will take you a good half an hour to an hour to eliminate all of them. And I found that sort of airlock system, albeit probably a bit overthinking this a bit too much, meant I got in. I had about 1 or 2 mosquitoes to deal with, I obviously didn't rehouse them, I dealt with them. But yeah, that was a way in which I got a good night's sleep, and I didn't have to deal with the mosquitoes too much at night. One final thing I should show on these things, just if any of you had the similar sort of experience I have when you're doing repairing tents, I should have said, when you're using this material and the rolls of tape, this stuff is very, very good. It's very, very sticky. But it also means that it's nigh on impossible to actually peel this off the backing. Unless you've got, I don't know, razor sharp manicured nails, the average person is not going to be able to separate that. So for a good 10 minutes, I had to work out how on earth I did this. And the system I developed, albeit I can't patent it and it's not very good, is that I'd actually take my neck knife and I'd actually just scrape a corner just enough that I could actually get my fingers in and actually start the peeling process. Once it starts peeling, it's really good. But the initial stuff is really frustrating to get this. I hope the manufacturers come up with some sort of pull tab so to make these patches a little bit more easy to use on trail. But they were very, very frustrating. But they're very good once you get them attached to the tent. They don't peel off. Well, certainly in my experience, once they're on, they stay on. So I'll stop there. I hope this is useful. In general to anyone using tents, and maybe the specifics about duplex. So I think the last thing I would say is, if you get a sheet of instructions with your tent, don't be overconfident. Actually read them, because there's probably a couple of things in there specific to your tent that would be a surprise. And in the same way for me, duplex, reading two blue labels indicating which direction into the wind, that was a surprise to me. So good to know. Hope this is useful. See you next video. Well, this is certainly interesting. I don't know if you can see outside. There's some hailstones, probably about the size of my tip of my thumbnail. Some slightly bigger. They've been clobbering my tent. Poor little tent hasn't pierced yet, so it's supposed to be Tyvek. But yeah, we're in a thunderstorm in the Northern Cascades, and for some reason, really heavy. There's one there. Hailstones, but tends to survive so far. I'm actually cowering under my thermarest pad, but thankfully the weather seems to be lightening up now. But yeah, we had a moment there when it was really thinking, cracky, if it does turn into full-blown hailstones, this tent may not survive, and I've got to do a runner whilst dodging hailstones the size of marbles, real marbles. Crikey. Anyway, it's 2nd of August, I think it's 2nd of August, anyway, it's Tuesday, as I head towards Tegan. First time I've had hailstones, but tent's held up so far, and fingers crossed we can survive the night. Actually, I spoke too soon. I've got a genuine tear in the tent there from one hailstone, and there's another one down there, but just checking the tent. Wow, so that took one hell of a clobbering. Full-blown hailstorm. My tent's going to survive this at all. Jesus, it's doing well so far. My goodness. There's sheer noise in this tent. I've repaired it once, but now I've got another tear now.